Tonight I'm very excited to welcome Mona Awad, celebrating the release of We Love You, Bunny. Mona Awad is the best-selling author of the novels Rouge, All's Well, Bunny, and 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl. She is a 3-time finalist for Goodreads Choice Award, the recipient of an Amazon Best First Novel Award, and she was shortlisted for the Giller Prize. Bunny was a finalist for a New England Book Award and was named the Best Book of 2019 by Time, Vogue, and the New York Public Library. It is currently being developed for film with Bad Robot Productions. Rouge is being adapted for film by Fremantle and Sinestra. Margaret Atwood named Awad her literary heir in the New York Times Teen magazine. She teaches fiction and the creative writing program at Syracuse University and is based in Boston. Awad will be in conversation with Haili Blassingame, a producer at 1A. She joined the team after being spring intern in 2019. Prior to joining 1A, she interned with NPR's Code Switch, Weekend Condition, and our music teams. She is a graduate of Spielman College and a native Washingtonian. Her debut novel, They All Fall in Love at the End, is forthcoming from Scribner in 2026. Please join me in welcoming Mona Awad and Haili Blassingame.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming. I'm so thrilled that I get to, this is my first event ever in DC, so I'm really thrilled to be here. Thanks so much to Politics and Prose for hosting it. Thank you, Haili, for being my conversation partner, and can't wait. I'm going to start by just reading a little bit from the book. So for those of you who don't know, Bunny is a New England campus novel about a clique of young girls, very privileged, these NFA students who call each other Bunny and who conjure hot men out of rabbits in very ritualistic off-campus workshops. And the story is told from the perspective of Sam, who is an outsider. She hates the bunnies, that she gets drawn into the cult in spite of herself, and then it gets weird. We Love You, Bunny picks up a couple of years later. Sam has written a book called Bunny. The bunnies are pissed, and they kidnap her while she's on a book tour, and they tie her up in one of the bunnies' attics, and they proceed to tell her how she got it all wrong. And then they tell her about their first creation. So that's the story. I'm just going to read a little bit from Cupcake's section, which is at the start. Hi there, Bunny. Remember me? So clever of you, truly, to reduce me to a baked good. So funny that you described me as a maniacal hair brayer, or what was it again? A child of the corn going to prom. I'm not going to comment further on your novel. We agreed to not. Except to say that when I perused it during a rehearsal break, I'm back in theater now, by the way. Oh, it's very lucrative. I laughed until I cried blood. So funny how you let your imagination just run away with you like that. How you really don't know anything at all about me or us or even like reality, really. I'll just hang on to the acts while we talk. Is that okay with you? I'll just get a bit closer to you physically also, so you can see my dress up close, the color of dreamy skyscapes tonight. Smell my lemony sugar smell, which I know turns you on a little, Bunny, don't deny it. In your novel, which I won't mention again ever, you even said you wanted to eat me when you first saw me, didn't you? I knew that. Could sense your hunger, both writerly and sexual, from the start. Could see it in your crazy eyes, through your bitchy hair curtain, black as night. You'd explain so much. It's why I didn't take any of your lies about me, or your very bad prose personally. Not at all. I took it instead as a very elaborate, yet ultimately crude fan fiction. Let me get even closer to you now so we can whisper, just you and me, if need be. So you can look right into my anime eyes while I set some things straight, as it were. About how it all started, Bunny. Before the boys, before the axe, before the magic of this attic was made known to us, before we were even made known to one another. I actually fought to be the first one to tell because, believe it or not, and on this point we sometimes disagree, it all began with me, actually. Yes, me, Caroline. I mean Coraline. It began with me, Coraline. What a Herculean effort she made to disguise my real name, by the way. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that lovely reading, Mona. So Bunny came out in 2019 and wrote a novel and tweet as well. I wanted to start by asking you, at what point did you know that you weren't done with this world and these characters? What made you feel like the story in that world needed a larger container?
Yeah, well, actually, right when I turned it in, when I turned it in, I missed it almost immediately, which is really funny because it was actually really scary to write that book. I did not think that I would ever finish it. I was so afraid of it in a lot of ways because it was going in a territory that I had never gone into before, which is the surreal, and kind of playing before and fairy tales. So I was super scared that I would be able to pull it off. So I should have been happy to turn it in, but I wasn't. I missed it terribly. I missed the world bit, and I just had to get over that. I wrote All's Well, and then I wrote Rouge after that, and I had that same kind of missing happen to me, but nothing as profound was Bunny. And I think it was around time that All's Well came out in 2021, 2022. Readers were starting to find it online, and they were starting to make their own art out of it, their own meaning, and just generating all this incredible stuff. And it kind of kept it alive in my head and gave me permission to go back. But I was already longing to return. I was going into dress shops and trying on dresses that Cupcake could wear. So I clearly missed her. I missed all of them. And so I just followed my heart. But I got permission from the others. Yeah.
We're so glad that you returned. So We Love You Bunny is a prequel and a sequel.
Yeah.
How did you arrive at that narrative structure of her origin story, but her aftermath? And how did you balance those two things?
Yeah, that's a great question. At first, it was just going to be a prequel. I was just going to tell the story of the Bunnies' first year in their MFA, and the story of how they got together, and the story of their first creation. But I needed that telling to have a point, and I kind of stuck on that for a bit. And then one of my dearest friends, who's been my reader since I was a college student, I dedicated Bunny to her, actually. She was like, well, why don't you be a sequel too? And have jump ahead in time and have the bunnies maybe tell Sam. And I had already been thinking of that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do that, but that's going to be really hard. But actually, no, it was great because now the bunnies are pissed. There's a point to their telling, a very strong point. They have an agenda. They have a case to make, which really sharpened their narratives. So it was actually the perfect thing to go forward and back in time. Yeah.
Well, another major difference between We Love You Bunny and Bunny is that Bunny is told from one point of view, which is Sam, 90. We Love You Bunny, and in my math is a terrible, has 5 frenemies at least.
Yes.
What types of opportunities did that open up for you, and what challenges did that present?
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever done multiple narratives. Really, the closest I think I've come is maybe in Bunny, where we're occupying Sam's perspective, and then when she gets into the cult, she's a lead, which is so fun to write. And I thought I would write all of this book in 3 weeks. Nope, like give to that. That's cheating. That's cheating. I've got to get into the heads of each person, each of the bunnies. I want to get to know them. And I was scared to break them open, but that was actually the true delight. And I realized I kind of knew a lot of stuff already about them. Like it wasn't as dark as I thought it was going to be. The fifth perspective, which is the first bunny boy, because it is modeled after Frankenstein, so it has that structure. To hear from our creators, and then we hear from the creation. I really wanted to do that and have one narrative underline or be underlined by the other. I was scared to write him, but I had COVID when I started writing him, and that turned off my kind of like, like reason, all reason capabilities. And so I just went for it, and he was, he kind of emerged fully formed, which was very exciting,
That was one of my favorite aspects, to like protect that bunny at all costs. Yeah. But I want to ask you about reality.
Sure.
Because when Bunny came out, I feel like there were a lot of questions about what was real, what was not real. And like those Reddit threads where they're like, that ending, was it real or not it? I feel like you court that question even more aggressively in this book. What about the slipperiness of reality, particularly for someone like a fiction writer, did you want to explore?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so funny that we talk about reality so much in a fiction work. I find it really funny, but I know why we do it. So you want to believe in the thing. You want to believe in the world that we're creating on a page. And what makes us believe in it is a mystery. Like something is either alive on the page or it's not. And you can usually tell as a reader whether something is alive or dead. But what makes it alive? It would be hard to kind of put your finger on exactly what it is. So that fundamental mystery of making something real out of fiction is something I really wanted to play with here, because that's really what they're doing. They're pushing the boundaries about as far as they can go. And so, of course, their creation, the Bunny Boy, is interested in this question too. What is real? Which kind of comes from Rudolph T. Rabbit also, for sure.
Another question that comes up in the book is the question of who art belongs to. Yeah. And sort of who has creative ownership over a thing when multiple hands were involved in the process.
Yes.
And I feel like your artistic influences are right throughout the story. How do you wrestle with that? Is that something that you struggle with? Is it, what is your relationship to this question of creative ownership?
Yeah, I guess I'm pretty interested in it, because that's like what drives this story. If there's a collective agenda that Bunnies have, they want to show them that they are real fucking artists, more so than Kirk, that he could tell her with the story of their Bunny Boy. But they also had an individual stake, too. They had an individual agenda, and that is to say, no, I'm the one, Ashley, not these other girls. I'm the one who did it. It was my special artistic, genius that's actually responsible for this transformation that we can do, bunnies into boys. So yeah, I think we want to feel like there's something about art making that allows you to express something that is authentically yours, right? So I feel I'm very attached to that. But I also think art is a conversation over centuries and countries and languages, and that's what makes fairy tales so wonderful. It ultimately is just a conversation for so many different kinds of storytelling. So I kind of just, the things that speak to me, I bring them in. But it's still, I have to have a stake in the narrative for me to be interested. It has to feel close to me. I do have to be involved.
Yeah, my heart does, for sure. Which writers do you feel like you were having a conversation with who love you, Bunny?
Well, definitely Mary Shelley. of course. For the structure of the story and for the narrative style, she has multiple narrators. She has multiple audiences. And the way the narration goes depends on who's listening. And that was so important to this book. So certainly her. For the Bunny Boy, kind of had three different threads of influence there. And wanted his voice to sound like the children's story, because he's a peasant, close to my bunny. So Watership Down, The Land of the Willows, which I think is an extraordinary novel. That kind of innocence and transcended sort of relationship with the natural world. And then Jane Eyre, of course, felt very important. The relationship with the narrator, best with Beer. The bunnies see Jane Eyre as a holy text. So, of course, that's was going to be our own influence. So I read it while I was working on that. And then I also wanted the Bunny Boy to have kind of a playful but dangerous kind of, just spikes swimming through his voice, because he is a little dangerous, as you'll see. So Pop of Orange, listening that I listened to was Raying's Bone and Surreal. Yeah.
Well, I think that's so fun about your writing is your metaphors for the creative experience are actually live. So another thing in this book is that there's a cost after creation, and that cost is like visible. Like we see you do what happens, you have to pay for it, and lots of times give away. But what does this cost? What does this cost?
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that, that's in fairy tale. There's always a cost to any kind of transformation. Character longs for something. Well, if you long for it and you get it, you have to pay a price. At least you definitely do it. Favorite fairy tales, The Little Mermaid. And that's kind of why I love that stories, because it really does show the shadow side of transformation, that there's a cost to any kind of change. I mean, for me, it's pretty intense. It costs me a lot, but it's also so worth it, because it's like it's the art, it's an articulation of something deep inside that when it's over, I actually feel it leave me. And it is kind of an intense moment to have this thing leave me. But then it too, and that's the beauty of it. That's how it kind of stays alive. It's not mine anymore. That belongs to readers. And I'm so grateful as a reader that I have books that I kind of hold on to and make cleaning up ill. I just think that's part of how it goes. But for me, it's just kind of been interesting, isn't it? Like my lights burned.
Do you have any sort of letting go ritual? Like when there's a project that you've been living inside and you're sort of trying to figure out how to part with it, how do you do that?
Yeah. I can get kind of weird about it. Yeah. I'll get flowers, for my character. I'm really into my character. And I'll usually, I make a playlist, and a playlist is really important to the writing process. I'll often make a playlist before I even start writing, and it kind of helps me get a sense of the atmosphere of the world. Kind of helps me believe in it before I even, start writing it. Because wanting to believe it is like the thing we want as writers. You want to believe in things. So the playlist will make people believe in the world, and then it sometimes even gives me bells. So I'll listen to the playlist. I always wear a perfume when I'm working on the novel, a very particular one, so that I always remember the experience of writing a book. Like when I sprayed a perfume, so I might wear it out for a while. But in the end, you gotta let it go by. Yeah. Yeah.
There's this really delicious sense of freedom in the way that you write, and it feels like you're almost not bound to the same constraints as other writers. But I know that early on in your writing career, you struggled a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what was that path to that freedom? Or how did writing Bunny free you? Because I feel like that's very evident in this book. I mean, it's like she did without. She wanted to tear it.
Yeah, that's true. I did. Well, 13 Ways, my first book, 13 Ways of Looking at Fat Girls, very, very realistic. I mean, it has some dreamy moments, but it's mostly in this world as we know it. This idea for funny, I knew was going to be in the surreal, and I knew that was important to me. I wanted to learn how to use the surreal as a mirror for the real, as a way to amplify something inside, like an emotional or a psychological reality, and use the surreal to do that. So it felt really scary. I could not keep a straight face when I would tell people about the book, and that worried me. I was like, I just don't know that I can pull this off. I did actually give up at one point. I gave pages to my first agent to read, and she was not into it. So I got, oh, fuck, okay, well, I guess I'm a writer of one book, and that's the end of that. And I kind of did give up for a while. I just thought, this book's just not going to see the light of day. But I missed it so much, and I wanted to see what would happen. So I kind of accepted that it wouldn't ever be published. That's how I had to that's what I had to do in order to finish it. I accepted that. I just wanted to know how it would end. And doing that, writing the rest of it, thinking it would never get published, just to see how it would end, allowed me to do whatever the fuck I wanted. And it was the most exhilarating creative experience I think I've ever had. So now it's always a question I ask myself when I'm stuck. Do you care if this sees the light of day? And I mean, of course you care, but do you care more about seeing this to the end? And if the answer is yes, then I just keep going.
It's always the fuck you novels that
Yes.
succeed. I don't want to forget to talk about how funny this book is, because I think you described it equals like axes and glory have and money, but it's hilarious. And I know it's hard to talk about humor and like how it infiltrates and how you do it, but how do you think about weaving humor into a book that is also doused in darkness?
Yeah. It's so hard. Humor is so hard, but I love it so much. And I think I don't know, it might just be the way that I have seeing the world. When I was a teenager, and still today, I mean, in my heart, was very Gothic soul. And I think the Gothic kind of subculture is really, really into darkness, but it kind of smiles at it, like it's kind of having fun with it. And to me, that's it. That's like the sweet spot. That's the truthful way, I think, into darkness. It's the way through darkness is to kind of approach it with a sense of play and a wryness and be in a reverence. And maybe you don't take yourself too seriously, even as you are taking yourself seriously. So that's always the way that I saw the world. So it does kind of come natural to me, but I think it's how I survive my own darkness.
At that point, you kind of make fun of artists a lot as you're in. And even though you make fun of artists and sort of how severe they are about their work, there's also a big theme of the purpose of art.
Yeah.
And especially writing as sort of key to the self. It has their doorway. Do you also?
Yes.
I'd love you to talk about how that resonates for you and sort of how writing, and this goal in particular, has led you back to a self that maybe you abandoned.
Yeah, I mean, it was a kind of a very crazy leap, this book, in a lot of ways. I was very scared of it, but I was very excited. I guess for me, what it does, usually the seed of a book that I'm writing will come from a moment I had in the actual world, where I felt really powerless in some, very profoundly. And, for example, All's Well, dealing with chronic pain. This was actually pretty intense, but in a more surface way that ended up being much deeper than I thought. The Rouge is all about a woman's obsession with skincare, which that is really specific gear for one. But it turned out that there was some deaths to that obsession that I didn't really know. It usually starts like that, and then writing the story kind of allows me to give language to the thing and make it powerless. So that like took language away from me. Writing fiction allowed me to kind of give language to to a moment that I lost my voice. So it kind of gives me a voice. And I think that happened with We Love You Bunny. I think there were just things in the first book that I'd always wanted to go explore, that I wanted to dig into more, especially, the life of art. And the fact that I think art has life. And that we have to be aware of that and be mindful of it and care for it and not to over-determine it, I wanted to explore that in this book, the life of art. And so, just kind of took all the license I wanted. And it did feel like something viably, was released because of that.
We recently had a conversation about for campus novel, campus novel. I do want to ask you about that because obviously universities have been a huge splash away. I don't know, both for a moment. And I'm just wondering how you're thinking about having either warn the college that some of the book is evil, and I need to see it people place. Or just like how you're thinking about institutions that don't always live up to this mythology around, especially when you talk about like allegories and things like that. Because then that's also something that you're getting at is like the darkness and corruption that belies these princes.
Yeah. I mean, it was very useful to write Bunny from the perspective of an outsider who comes from a working class background. But she really is a fish out of water in this place. She lives in a car, which a lot of students do to survive and to be able to go to school. And it's kind of weak. I remember observing that when I first came here. So I'm okay. So when I first came to the U.S. and I went to graduate school in the U.S., I remember being really surprised by some aspects of the culture around higher ed. I think that perspective, that outsider perspective, was useful and allowed you to make me more critical of it. But this book too, even though it's being told from the perspective of characters who have more privilege, what I think it breaks open is that they're not at home there either. There's a ton of expectation that they feel as well, and that they don't think that they're living up to. And they create delusion, and different kinds of mythologies to get through it, to survive it, because it's kind of hard for everyone. No one can really live up to the myth that these institutions have created. So it was really fun to explore it in their perspective. You think you're kind of entering perspective of more power, but it's not true. And that's the same with teachers too. Big teachers have power, but they don't. I, as a teacher, can tell you it's not a position of power.
So I want to ask you a personal question, which is, as we talked about, you wrote Bunny kind of from a place of doubt, or you didn't know what was to happen, and you didn't necessarily have a cause of reinforcement during the writing process. Obviously, now we're featured. Bunny is beloved. But it can take a second to, if any, process that level of success. So how are you reflecting on that, like 6 years later, and as you're ushering this its sister into the role, and how are you feeling?
Oh, it's like such a dream. I mean, I still am shocked by it, honestly. And I didn't really know for years. I didn't know the community of readers who were finding it in person because All's Well came out during the pandemic. Didn't really tour for. So it was only when I toured for Rouge at 2023 that I started getting to meet readers, and that was so wonderful. And really seeing up close readers' captions to the book. I'm just incredibly honored and moved by it. Yeah.
Since you're a teacher, as you said, a writing teacher, do you have any advice for writers who are maybe struggling with self-doubt or negative reinforcement about how to find play and joy and sort of self-confidence in their work?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell a little story. So when I was an undergrad, I took a creative writing workshop, and I listened to the poetry professor. He taught poetry first, and then he's going to teach poetry and fiction. And he played this recording of Howl by the poet Allen Ginsberg, and it was Ginsberg reading Howl, and it was such an incredible experience for me to listen to it. I didn't understand it, but I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard, especially hearing him read. It was just so powerful to me. And so I went home that night and I wrote my own howl, that it was about body image. And then I kind of used symbols and I used confessional like confessional style. And it was so exciting. And I felt so good. I felt like, oh my God, this thing, it's alive. I knew it. I knew I'd written something, Gave it to my professor, and he said, "Oh my God, you're a poet." And I said, "Oh my God," and then I dropped out. And I dropped out because I was afraid that the next thing I wrote would be disappointing, and that it was just a fluke, and I just wouldn't be able to do it again. But I would fail at this thing that I discovered I cared about so much. And I stayed away from writing for quite a while. I wouldn't go back to it for a while. I was too afraid of failing. So my advice is don't be afraid to fail, because when I finally got back to it, I failed a lot. But it just meant so much that I just was willing to accept it. Was willing to accept that was the process. That if I had done that earlier, I don't know what would have happened. It might have been better for me. Yeah.
Even speaking of poetry, I mean, the prose is poetic. I mean, is poetry part of your creative process? Like, do you read it a lot?
I used to. I mean, it was really my way into literature. It was all I listened to. I listened to, E. Cummings read. I used to listen to this club when McEwen. She's paid, but this volume of poetry called Armies of the Moon, where she's also very educational. She's incredible voice, and I would listen to that every night. I was obsessed. I really loved poetry. It's so funny because I really, really give it a hard time and poets, but I love poetry, and I do these. Yeah, I guess I love it because it doesn't necessarily follow logic. It's just like the language of, it's the language of the heart, and it has an incantatory quality to it, and I love that. And I'm very mindful of that when I'm writing a verse stuff. Yeah.
The animus between the poets and the fiction writers.
Yeah, it's kind of accurate. It's weird. I mean, that's not true. Poets and fiction writers are friends. But they do kind of, in an MFA, sometimes they really do kind of separate in strange ways. So it's just amplified in money. There's kind of weird thing as the tips happens. The poets are reappropriate fiction writers. They will take the fiction workshop, but fiction writers take the breadwinners, taking voices. Yeah.
So before I hand it over to audience questions, I wanted to ask you, because I know that you tons of interviews, so you ask the same question over and over again. Is there a question that you wish you were asked about this book?
Oh, well, somebody in Boston asked me, who would I like to be roommates with? And I'll tell you, but it's Cupcake. Yeah. And I figured that out by the process of elimination. Yeah, because I think the Duchess would be too scary. In mind games, like crazy. And Vignette would not keep a place clean up. I think it would be really dirty. And Previo just always whining. And that would be too hard. So Cupcake, yeah, she's solution very hard. If that's okay, I think I could handle that. Over the other three. Sometimes very delusional is the answer.
So I think we're going to hand it over to audience questions, and people that go around with the mic. And I will just repeat the question so everyone can hear it. This is being recorded. Yeah.
I'm curious why bunnies? Like, why of all the animals out there? Is it a personal love for bunnies or another?
Well, yes, definitely. Bunnies, it's funny because you can actually see them, like out in the world. And every time I see one, they always feel magical to me. It never stops being magical to see a bunny. And there are a ton of bunnies on campuses all across the country. We were talking about that in an interview on the other day. Yeah, and so I remember I had this idea cooking in my head, and I saw a bunny hop across canvas, and I saw it. I was like, okay, I have to do it. I have to follow the bunny all the way right it. Yes. They're magical. They really are.
I really appreciated your comments earlier about playlist. In Bunny, I've only made about halfway through We Love You Buddy, but in Bunny, I feel like I really could hear what was happening. And, like Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush is blaring the first 50 pages. The playlist gets more clear. What's the playlist that you were talking about for We Love You? Like, who are we hearing?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of Kate Bush there, too. She was kind of the North Star for this book. When I was stuck, I would listen to certain tracks over and over again. And Hands Above, like, a lot. Because it just has so much energy. I also Fleetwood Mac, weirdly, was very important to the bunnies. And there were certain tracks by the end that I would listen to on repeat while I was working. And then for Bunny Boy, I won't reveal his name. His soundtrack was a little different. There was a lot of new wave, and stuff that magnetic heels, and this ambient track by Laura Huron called Times Were. Listen to that constantly while I was writing his voice, and it's what I listen to say I to learn. So yeah, 13-minute hanky.
Hi, everyone. So many of your books deal with like how bizarre and hard it is to like have a body as a person, like being fat or limiting you cane, or like there's the cupcake comment at the beginning if you're not that anymore. I'm curious like how we think about the like the physicality of characters when you're writing them, and like how does that affect your writing process?
I mean, it's everything to me. Sometimes I think maybe I should have written plays or something, because I'm always thinking about my character. I'm thinking about being the body of my character and how that feels all the time. And it's where I get the energy for the voice and the sword. That's where it comes from. It's just the little details. And they're not really details. They're very telling. The surface is always so telling what's underneath. So just paying attention to clothing and like how somebody, and Jessica says so much out there. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's always been the portal to the interior, the cerebral, like of any character doing less. And yeah, I guess I'm also just very interested in it because I've grappled with these things. All's well already did. I still deal out tape. So that mall will kind of really allow me to give language to that. And I didn't go to see in fiction. So yeah.
Hi. So the voice of the bunnies, just sort of the way that they talk, I think, especially for anyone who, was a girl in middle or high school, is so, like, it really says straight teapot edge. And it's, like, really terrifying, but it's also incredibly tempting to talk that way. I think I found myself, the more I read the book, I, just wanted to start calling everybody Buggy, and I was sad, and the kind of really satisfying passive-aggressive comments. Yeah, see? I wondered, A, if it was hard for you to settle into that voice, or B, if it was, so tempting, and, were you doing it too much and find yourself, did it out of fortuitous, or it just felt like both to me every time I read it.
Yeah, I mean, it is fortuitous, but it is also, it was eerily easy. like I started to be like, what's up with you? Where are the likings, you know? But writing, when I wrote Bunny, one of the most joyful sections for me writing it was the section where Sam is sort of a bunny and she's using her weed. That was so much fun. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like we're wearing the mask, but the villain is like extremely delicious. Especially when you've written through respect everyone else, or who's been there. Get on the other side, undermine her narrative. It's just so much fun.
Hi. I've read a couple of your books now, and so this question I'm thinking back to Bunny and a little bit of Bruges and a little bit of All as well, but I noticed that in the characters they may be unreliable narrators and common emotions or thought processes they had. To me, I could really feel the paranoia of these characters oftentimes.
Yeah.
So my question is, how you get into the mindset of being able to convey that paranoia so clearly through pages?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. I think I am interested in reporting the experience that somebody who is, for whatever reason, on the outside or feels like they don't belong, because their experience of the world is usually constantly being undermined, undervalued. They're often gaslit, and so it's actually pretty horrific. It's easy to get paranoid, and it's also easy to start second guessing yourself. Well, is this happening to me? I don't even know anymore. I'm just not sure, and that's the stuff of horror. That's why I kind of love Forks, because it kind of taps into that, that experience that anybody who's kind of felt like an outsider or who felt like they're in a position of powerlessness has felt. So I think it's just what I'm interested in, and then I just give language to it all and never hold back. Thank you.
Hi. First, just want to say thank you so much for coming to speak with us. This has been amazing. My question was kind of similar, the kind of second half of it, which is that also as reading these books, I almost started to feel a little bit crazy myself reading them, kind of like questioning what I thought about things. And I wanted to ask about the editorial process of how do you make sure that your voice stays clear and you're on the same page with your editors, and how close, I guess, is the final draft to what you originally wrote?
Yeah, it's kind of true that I definitely don't hold back. But I do anything that doesn't ring true to the character, I will cut before I even hand it over. My agent is the person who kind of gets the first read. And usually it's like, he'll just ask questions, that kind of pull on something that maybe I didn't think about before. But they're not usually to do with the voice. The voice is usually kind of what it is. I guess that read is pretty important, but by the time I get to turning in, the kind of the changes aren't too major, because my reader is the person that I dedicated mine to. So she kind of really helps me. She reads like that first draft and really asks the big questions. And I, working with her and working with another reader, if you can find two people, her writers in the audience, if you can find two people who are readers of yours that you trust, it's like the biggest gift. Because, you really, really need that encouragement. Is so important. Thank you.
Hi, Bunny.
Hi to me.
When writing Love You, Bunny, was there anything specific that was more challenging for you to come back to, and how did you overcome that when writing?
Yeah. Well, the thing I was really scared of was writing the Lane Boy's voice, but it came, and I was very grateful. In fact, when I discovered it, I figured out the ending And I actually wrote it on my con because I was going for a walk. And then I looked back when I was finished. I looked back to see if the note on my con was similar to the ending of the hat. How was this? It's all the same. So that was kind of amazing. I guess I knew there was going to be a little more violence in this one. Maybe I was a little nervous about that because even though I teach gore and I'm so interested in horror, I am a little squeamish. Maybe that's why I'm interested. So I guess I was a little bit scared at that. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm writing a slasher. But then something happened that made me writing slasher okay for me. And I was able to get through, and I can't reveal it because that would be a total spoiler. But thank you for the question.
Wait, Holiday. I'm here to reiterate, you mentioned earlier that writing this novel really scared you. It made you uncomfortable. And even when I find myself writing some hands, I read something and I was then you knew I have big screen with it. So that you asked up instead of main door response. But I was I'm curious for you, I had to write, you could say that's the key to good writing. So I'm curious for you how to kind of talk it to that they got feeling it's gonna consume you or feeling you get past the fear.
What consumes you? Sorry.
Sorry, I'm feeling when you are scared of something, how you can get past it when not break too far.
Yeah, I was really afraid of that with Cole as well. I was thinking lots of people about pain. How am I going to do? How am I going to do that and make it pasta to read? And then I found the sense of play, and it was a sense of play that we stay in the dark, scary place, and do it truthfully. Do it truthfully, and actually do it more truthfully than if I had just gone into the dark without that sense of play. There's something about play that gives permission, and makes it okayistic. That's quite humorous, so sort of to me, and why I like it about writing. So it's that. Okay.
Hi, Connie. Has teaching changed the way you can think about or approach your work?
Try to honestly think of the cats. So I don't know. But I do think it's maybe read differently. Maybe not always in a good way. Because I'm always thinking, how can I cheapen this? It's just not a useful thing to do. Now I either have a very different approach. I think that question at first, when I first started teaching that is so important to me. It's oh gosh, how do I teach this text? We don't teach a text. Kind of put a text on the table and we all read and talk about and we figure out its meaning together. And that's how we do it. So yeah, honestly, being a teacher has made me realize that I have nothing to teach.
Hi. So I guess I was curious about your process, especially with Bami, because it was a new world and your passive characters. Yeah, and you spoke to kind of how it started to busy. So I was just kind of to hear more about how you felt that. Okay, not put the Nancy.
So I hear the first part.
I guess just being your process. Yeah, especially with approaching a new world in the dunya.
Yeah. Usually it does start with some point of tension, I think realizing that the bunnies were pissed was so good. It was so good. It was such a great engine to the story. It drove it. It made it so fun. So I kind of have to, I guess what I have to tap into is an emotion. Not just a character who lives here and works here. No, a moment in their life. It's where they're experiencing a really intense emotion is usually my point of entry. Because, I like to kind of go bold. Yeah.
So I think that like one of my favorite things about your work is just that I feel like your writing is so grounded in reality, but with your plot, I feel like you really earn the reader's trust from the beginning, and then you take us kind of on this journey.
Yeah.
And I feel like your plots are so like, just like magical and like vibrant, but at the same time, I feel as though your books are very character driven, and I'm kind of curious almost as if going into the writing process, you know where the story's going to take you, or if it's more of like getting to know that character and just going on that journey alongside them, and just kind of like what that process looks like for you.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. It's one that I think writers have different feelings about. You know, are you with the character, or do you kind of think about the plot first? For me, they kind of come together because I don't just think about a character. I think about a character at a particular moment in their lives where something has really pushed them, you know, to a place. You know, and that's happened in every book. Usually starts that way. So there's a shape there already because that's where it starts. And I guess that's the place that I'm interested in. And how they grapple with that and how they move through that, you know, often I ground it in their specific experience in the world, and then I use the surreal to amplify that. But I always start in the real world so that readers believe in it, because that's how it works for me. I can't, if it doesn't feel real, Moody and you're talking about Brand again, it's true. If it doesn't feel real, I'm not going to be. So I really like specificity and grounding to be able to do what I'm going to do. But I like tension, too, with a lot of tension, because that gives shape. You know. Thank you.
Any other question? And that time for one more.
Yeah.
Hi. Oh, this is gonna be a real weird question that I really would not ask it. But it's funny. You go for it. Hey. Part that I like super focus on is when I read the book, sometimes I pick up on things and sometimes I'm very surprised by the end.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering, as you write, because I've tried my hand at writing, and I love that was kind of writing, and I can never get it because it is a very specific art. How you balance graphic hints that are not obvious until you get to the end, but if you were to go back and read the book, you're like, oh my god, I see it. Yeah, it becomes very evident, but yeah, they're really not. And then when you read other books, you're like, oh, I know it from the first page. I can see where this is it.
Right. Oh, that's tricky. That's tricky. And that's honestly is such an annoying here. That's like you do have to use your intuition to make those choices. And so I do, and I usually do know the revelation about the book early on. I do know the thing. I don't like planting it later. I like kind of, going back and then planting it. You know, that's not good. I like it being in my subconscious and it kind of just informing voice. But my role for myself is usually I'm in this character's experience in this moment. I can't reveal anything that they don't know, you know? So I just have to kind of really stick to that. And that usually is a great guide about what to reveal and not to reveal and when. Because if you start getting too in your head about that, don't raise. Yeah. So I think that's it. Well, thank you so much.